Where do I start? They say life imitates art. I'm trying to paint a picture. Paint a picture that's licking you scripture. I ain't just another nigga. Another nigga with a dream. It seems we finally made him all believe. A dream to be the reason we come to achieve. The life that we would all kill for, even die for. I score, so sick, so sick.
Well, all human beings deserve dignity, respect, but that's part of the issue is that
well, we're not doing it.
Yes, so that's dehumanizing, and you talk about somebody like that because you don't think of them, fully as a person,
right?
I mean, and it's not always malicious because I can't say throughout my whole life in locker rooms that I might not have said some things that I wouldn't necessarily want attached to me now, but that's the difference between being dumb and 19 and having some experience and learning more about how the fuck the world works.
That's one of those things is they talk about like all the shit that's happening with people now. Charlamagne says they would never let Malcolm Little become Malcolm X in 2019 because they're gonna hold the shit you did way back in the day against you, and if we expect to call people up for their bullshit and they change, then
this is a conversation I had with somebody the other day. I was like, if you can't be sorry, right, and change what you've done, what's the point?
Then what? Right. Yeah.
What, if we can't grow as people, what is the actual point? You either were awesome or you're not, and we just give up on everybody. And you see people all the time who you hear stories about people who was I was in gangs, I was a drug dealer, I was a murderer, and then I became a motivational speaker and I help all these kids not do these things. And you're like, well, are we throwing that guy out? What's going on?
Yeah.
What's it, the statute of limitations? How long can we hold your not past bullshit against you? So today on the Changing the Narrative podcast, we got a little manpower hour. We got three bros talking about man shit. I'm trying to break down this Gillette ad because it was some shit going on and people had some things to say. We got 3-4 questions we want to kind of pose generally to talk to the people and get the people, because we want the people's perspective as well. It's not just us talking shit. We got to hear what the people got to say. So before we get into the topics, I gotta let y'all know who I'm here with. I'm here with some beautiful human beings. They both got bald heads, and I love them both. The gentleman across from me is Potato Chip Podcast Man. One red cat, one red mic. He goes by the name
Mike Tanner.
Mike Tanner's here once again. Y'all know this beautiful man. Welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you.
And we also have the other bald headed man, Big Baby, with his big brain. He goes by the name
KYLER Crawford.
Welcome
to meet you.
Welcome, sir. Welcome, sir. Welcome to the Changing the Narrative podcast. I'm your host, Terrence Taylor. And we're going to talk about some man shit.
Let's do it.
But before we do that, we got to make sure we shout out our guest photographer. Carter Hutton's in the building, snapping pictures. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Carter. Shout out to Carter Hutton. He's doing some co-op hours with Common Good Solutions, so he came to hang with us on the podcast tonight. So thank you so much for coming. Make sure you check out the internet webs because that's where all the photographs are going to be that Sir Carter has taken. Okay, y'all ready to talk some shit?
Let's get her going.
Boom, done.
Let's do this.
Deal. We're here, Changing Their Podcast, Manpower Hour. One topic, the Gillette commercial. What is masculinity?
I think that's
one of the questions.
Good spot for us to start. We bounced around that a little bit.
Yeah. So what is masculinity? What's the other question, KYLER?
Social issues, advertising, what's up? What do we think?
How do the people feel about corporations using social issues to sell products? And what was the other question?
Is it okay for boys to be boys, or can boys be boys, or will boys be boys?
Are boys even boys?
Are boys even boys?
So let's start with masculinity. What is masculinity? Does anybody because the definition of it, I'm sure, is probably much different than how we actually act as masculine folks. Mike, how do you define masculinity? I'm gonna find the dictionary definition.
I mean, we talked about this a little bit before. I don't know anymore. If you had asked me even 10 or 15 years ago, I probably would have said, well, it's the things that make a man a man. It's the things that, and I probably would have thought of things like strength and loyalty and these things of the old West kind of gunslinger attitudes of what a man is. And we were talking about this. I don't know of any qualities that would be in a man that I wouldn't just want to see in humans.
Right.
Like I just can't come up with something that I'm like, that's a trait of masculinity and it should only be for men and it shouldn't have anything to do with women. I just can't. I can't come up with anything. So I don't know if there's a definition of masculinity.
Yeah, I think.
Kyler, how do you define it?
I think it's difficult. I think you're right, because there's also, like, I could list off all those things: general tendency toward assertiveness, toward aggression, and if you look at it, if you take the whole sample size, all of humanity, yes, men tend toward that. We got different physiology, and I think safe enough to assume that there's probably some inherent variance. You throw all of us up, it's not going to be 50% of one gender on one side of the line, 50% on the other. There's going to be some variance, but that doesn't mean that there is a right and a wrong way to be, right? There's a broad spectrum of whatever sets of general personality traits there are. So I think it's kind of tough to start going beyond, well, this is generally how males tend to be and generally how females tend to be, and then there's all sorts of other variations thereof scattered across the spectrum, and they're all just kind of there, and that's how things are. But kind of more to your point about the traits of man, I think generally when I think of like things that make me think, because I do still think this sometimes, like just be a man. Like just
yeah. But what does
be a man about it?
What does that mean?
And I think that means, when I think that, it's about are you responsible? Do you handle your business? Are you straightforward? You have courage in your convictions. Are you respectful of others?
Yeah.
Try to stick up and stick your neck out to help people when you can.
Right.
Which is like a noble man.
Those sound like noble woman characteristics to know.
I wouldn't have a problem with someone who said, be a man, and then said, and I expect that to be these things. Like if you said, I have a son. If I said to my son, be a man, and then I said, and that means, and then played this clip of Kyler talking about what it means to be a man, I would have no problem with that.
Right.
Because I'd be like, I am asking you to be a man, which you are, and I'm asking you to have these traits and fulfill these traits that I expect of it. And I think that's it. I think when you say be a man, that's so different from what we hear in things. Like we hear like be a man as in like don't cry, don't show emotion, don't, all these kind of things.
Is that still a thing though? Is that still a thing we're telling boys and men to be? Like
I still hear that.
Yeah. And I think that's also interesting, because in my list, if I went down the list, I'd say there's a variation of that, right? I think in general, obviously we've all got emotions and you got to be real about them, but I don't think it is a desirable trait in anyone's personality to be governed by those emotions.
Sure.
Right? So I think that's kind of, it's, don't act like whatever happened doesn't bother you. And if you got to cry about it. Nothing wrong with that, but you got to move forward. I'd say that's the kind of be a man part.
Yeah.
And really, like I said, the traits of a man, that's just because that's what they're called. I mean, they're the traits of a decent hairless ape, and we're all that. So I don't care what you consider yourself. Like, try to comport yourself in that way.
But that's there's boxes.
That's the ideal.
There's boxes to describe things. So I guess it's like we asked the question, what is masculinity? And I feel like neither one of you have really answered the question.
No.
At all. And for me, I would have a hard time defining.
So is masculinity a personality trait or physical characteristics?
Well, is masculinity about being traits, or is it about being energy? Because we all have masculine and feminine energies, and they're supposed to work together. Men are not supposed to be masculine all the time, and women are just supposed to be feminine all the time. Like, that's not how it works. There's a flow and a balance of the two within all people.
So what are the energies then? Because we just said, what's the definition? What's the definition of masculine energy versus feminine?
I think it's more like you're asking about, like, is it traits? And I don't know if it's like you have to. Like there's a check box of, do X, Y, and Z, and that makes you a man. But I feel like there's.
But what's his masculine energy?
Right.
Feel like?
So is that from I think of animals and shit, right? So protecting, providing, building, kind of. It sucks because
I mean, you take lions.
But it's the lady line that holds shit down.
They go do most of that work.
Well, they hunt. The male lion guards the territory.
Guards the territory.
The other lions.
Female lion hunts.
So, which was disillusioning when I found that out because I was younger. I'm like, that seems like a good deal for the male lion. He just chills at home and they go hunt. And like, oh no, he's got to work too.
Yeah,
right.
And so even in that, it's like the woman goes out and collects the food, and he tries to carry that into humanness, and the women make the food, and the man protects the house and does so. But I also see.
So like lion with grocery shopping is what you're saying.
Well, the lady lion does the grocery shopping. Yeah, that's how it works. And the man lion protects the house so that when the lady lion comes home to cook the food.
That sounds to me like if I think of things like I've been a stay-at-home dad for 7 years. Okay. The go to the grocery store and hunting are two totally different things. What it sounds like is that the lady lion goes and is the breadwinner, bring her bacon. She gets the stuff. Okay. And the dude just stays at home with the kids and is like, well, house didn't burn down. Everyone's still alive, but I guess we made it. It sounds like male lions are stay-at-home dads.
Right.
And female lions go out in the world and work.
So who would be feminine, who would be masculine within the line? And I guess that's why I'm curious, right? Like, I don't know. It's so weird. And that's why I guess I've heard, and then you look at, say, maybe the black community, well, where men are supposed to be, to be a man in that community, you gotta be tough. You gotta be, willing to do whatever to take care of the family. Oftentimes, these are illegal things that end up leading to you being in a place where you're not being much of a man because you're not providing for your family, period. Right. So I guess when they're asking the question, like, what is masculinity? And I think we're all having a difficulty in describing even what it is because I feel like we've seen different definitions and people exhibiting different types of masculine energies. As athletes. We were big barbaric jock dudes who played rough sports and trash talking and that running down the court with your arms out glistening and shiny and the girls was looking at you and it was like that's what it meant to be a man. So
did you glisten a lot? Were the ladies looking at you while you're glistening?
I was out there glossy like a motherfucker.
You weren't shiny, Mike?
I don't think I was too shiny.
You gotta get your shine on, man. That's what I'm
working
saying.
on it now.
But that I guess it's hard to understand or hard to put a finger on what it is because we've seen so many varying representations of it within the spectrum of what masculinity actually is.
Okay. Well, let me take a stab at it then, because I guess we got to kind of go back to what's our version versus what does it really mean.
Okay.
So, you need to handle your responsibilities and look after the people around you. I think that's a big part of my concept of what it is. So if I think of like what am I trying, the general values I'm trying to espouse, the way I'm trying to live my life, I want to be able to look after and protect from harm if necessary, but generally more try to help out the folks around me that I care about.
Right.
Now that doesn't mean by any stretch that a woman couldn't do that. Like even if you had relationship with traditional gender roles, they're both doing that in their own way. If that's working. So what does that even mean? Like there's no going out and making a bunch of money to buy a new house versus holding it down at home. Like those both fulfill the mandate to, handle your business and take care of people around you.
Right. That it's not so much what you do, but how you do it. It's not so much that you have to be the person who goes out and works. It's not so much you have to be the person who does this. It's the idea of like, do you handle your stuff? Like, do you actually handle it? And I don't know. I think that's, I can't come up with why that's masculine though.
Yeah. Well, is it maybe right? Not that masculinity is, it's not that it's necessarily more than. Is it that femininity is less than? Like you think of like what can women get away with? Okay. Or traditionally, and it's not
talk about it.
Yeah, saying like how women are expected, have been expected to act. Like, it's like. I feel like I'm getting into dangerous territory here.
Listen, I can't wait. I'm here for this.
Yeah. So, we got this. We'll go fine. In all seriousness, like it's, she's a girl, she's emotional. Like not that it's wrong to be emotional, but someone who's flighty and emotional, it's generally, that's a feminine trait, or dude, why are you being such a chick about it? Right. We've all
stop being a bitch.
Yeah,
that's what you wanted to say.
What are you, a little girl or something? Yeah. Which again, then you're bringing being a child into it, so that's a different thing. Right. But is it maybe more that the masculine traits are the ones that a person is supposed to have. And, if you're someone who wants to think of women as kind of maybe a little bit less than, then it's all right to give them a break and let them be emotional, because we don't expect that much from them, because, they're just chicks. Right?
So it's more you said earlier before the podcast about this idea of the narrative that we've created around it. So it lines up with that, where it's the story we've told is that this is what men can do, and this is or can be, and this is what women can't do or can't be, and we've sort of set them up as that black and white sort of dichotomy of things.
Yes, right. I mean, take like a woman who had a crying breakdown at work versus a man who had a crying breakdown at work. Both people as professionals got some shit to climb out from under, probably, but the woman could, she was just being emotional, maybe something was going on at home. It's like, or, oh god, I hope he's all right. It's a bigger deal for the man to do it, right? And in which case it's a bigger deal? I don't know. Two situations. If someone's crying,
but here's the thing, I don't think it's about which is a bigger deal, and I think that's when we're talking about less than or talking about equality. It's like men can cry and women can cry, and which matters more? Neither fucking one of them. Human beings are being emotional, and that's fine. So I guess and I guess it's where the Gillette commercial is even coming in, and just being addressing some of the things that men have been over time to understand, okay, so what does it mean to be a man? What is masculinity? For them to say, is this the best men that we can be, in kind of challenging what are men? So
you look at all the Gillette ads before this ad. Right. They're all ruggedly handsome men doing manly things. Right. And then their tagline is Gillette, the best a man can get. Right. And so I think, they've spent a long time really buying into that concept of like, we are working, and, you've never seen a Gillette ad where a dude's crying and shaving and being like, I'm glad this razor works so well because I can cry and also shave. Yeah. Like, that's not an ad they would have put out before. Right. So I think it is interesting that we'll talk a little bit about the various reasons they may have done this, but I think it's interesting for them to really challenge their own tagline and say, like, are we actually the best a man can get? And what does that even
what stereotype is being perpetuated by what a man is? And if we're feeding into that, what exactly is that we're feeding into? Yeah. Because that's what it is, right? Like, other than Me Too movement and men being fucking pigs and R. Kelly and Weinstein and all this other shit. Okay, yeah, cool. I get all that, but I think it's more than that. Even in the commercial, it was boys wrestling, or a group of boys chasing another boy, bullying them and chasing them down the street. Or what was some of the other examples where like, no boys, you cannot do these things.
They had a lot of things where they were just kind of like, they were saying some of the phrases we would typically hear said to especially sort of adolescent boys about be a man, don't cry like a girl, blah, blah, blah. And I think, Kyler, you wanted to maybe talk about the boys wrestling a little bit. Is that...
that's that was an interesting one for me. I'd heard a lot of hype about the commercial, and then finally...
So for those of you who haven't seen the commercial, I really hope that you have. Gillette did an ad where they basically showed a bunch of boys doing boy things, and we challenged whether or not this is the best boys can be. And now it's a 2 minute long ad, a minute and 50 seconds long. So
if you haven't seen it, first, I don't know how the hell you found us and you haven't seen that ad yet, because it's everywhere. But do go
press pause.
Pause, go check it out. The rest of this will make a lot more sense.
There you go. Yeah. Keep going.
But so now that you're back, I saw it, and it was interesting because I've been kind of primed that, you see the headline in the Toronto Sun, men are pissed about this because Toronto Sun. So you see that, and you're like, okay, this is going to be controversial. And I'm watching it, and it's not controversial at all. I'm like, what are they saying is bad? Packs of boys running after and bullying other boys, mansplaining. I think what she was trying to say is in a meeting, like
with the touch of the shoulder.
The shoulder touch. That was especially nice. Dude looked like Patrick Bateman. He was creepy with the long hair. All that shit. You look at it and you're like, no, I don't like any of that. Yeah. And then right at the end, the dad's at the barbecue and these boys are wrestling, and they're both smiling.
Right.
And the dad runs over and says, hey, that's not how we play. Like, I get what you're trying to do, but you forgot to tell your little child actors not to smile. Now it looks like you broke up roughhousing. Now it's just, now you're just, you stumbled right at the goal line of pulling this off. Now you've got something there that even I, who endorse 90% of the ad, I'm like, oh, you can't take roughhousing. And I don't know. I wonder if it kind of blunts the impact. This is running back the punt
and celebrating just before the end zone and just dropping the ball on the 1 yard line.
Yeah. Like, we killed this. We don't have to reshoot the kids punching each other.
So boys shouldn't roughhouse either. Basically, we shouldn't wrestle.
Yeah, I don't think that's what they were trying to say, but that's what that scene looked like. And then that's
Mike. What do you think they're trying to say?
Well, I think what they were trying to say, the kid who was on top is a little bit bigger, and I'm guessing that the kids were supposed to be like. He was supposed to be beating up, his younger brother, putting a pounding on him, and his younger brother was supposed to be upset about that, and his older brother was supposed to be a big bully, but it literally comes across as like two kids just playing rough, and there's it's a hard thing because I have a 7-year-old boy, I have a 4-year-old daughter, and on the playground they're really not allowed to touch. Like, you're not allowed to physically wrestle or roughhouse at all on the playground. Like, they play soccer, and if two kids, bump into each other, it becomes like someone comes over and they got to have a mediator and they got to talk it all out and figure out what happened. And you're like, well, those two boys ran into each other playing soccer. And they're fine with it. You're not, but they're totally fine with it. And, I've watched kids be like, I thought they were fighting, and I've kind of gone over, and both boys are like, we're fine. Like, relax. And so we are getting to the point where there's this zero touch sort of policy from a physical aspect, and I can understand why it happens in a school environment, because you end up getting sued because someone's doing whatever. But I think at home, my daughter sits on my son's head and they wrestle and they fight, and if they're both okay with it, and they're both okay with it, and then they learn that there's a difference, that there actually is a point where someone is not okay with it, and you change your behavior based on how people feel about different things. Yeah. But if you just say, no one touch everyone, and we all got to get one of those roller bubbles you have in camp to run and play bubble soccer in, I don't think that does anybody any good.
Yeah, I think there's a pendulum. There's a spectrum, and to say it feels like an all or nothing type.
I think that's where the discourse is, I guess. Everyone's got to talk in tweets and comments and sound bites that can be recorded, and if you don't know people who hold different opinions and get to talk about them with them, then anyone who disagrees with you does it in a very simple manner because you see it through the internet or some similar media. And of course that's a stupid viewpoint. Look at that dumb simple thing they said. Well, you don't get to ask many questions about it. So, it ends up just kind of, things become all or nothing because there's no room to say, well, kind of this, but kind of that, just as you said.
Right. Yeah. So back to the question about masculinity and being a man and being the best type of man. Do you think that, Mike, as a dad, how do you have the conversation with your young person to create the next generation of men? How does that work? Because
there's a few things. Number one, you have to model it. You can't tell a kid. I can't tell my son never hit a woman and then hit my wife, and where I can't tell him not to yell at people and then yell at him, or which we've done. I've 100% been you do not yell at me, and you're in his face, and you're like, this is literally the dumbest thing I could be doing. So I think a lot of it comes in the modeling, and a lot of it, recently has come in what I've tried to do, which is really compliment the things that I really love that he does that maybe wouldn't be seen in general. So prime example, my son plays hockey. He is not particularly good. He just started playing. His kids have been playing for quite a few years more than him, and so he's he's struggling with it a little bit, and he kind of gets outskated, and he's actually quite tentative when he's playing hockey. It's rough when he plays soccer and stuff, but hockey so far is a little tentative. So last week we had a game, and the young girl who was playing nets would make like 3 or 4 saves in a row, but our team's terrible. So then they would score on the 4th goal, and she's kind of getting lit up. We got beat by quite a bit. And after this sort of string of a couple goals in a row, my son skated over behind her and gave her like 3 big taps on the shoulder, just like, hey, it's okay. Then they kept playing. And honestly, like, I didn't comment on the fact that he hit the post on a shot. He threw himself in front of the net on a bunch of plays, which he did. In terms of like, he told me how much he blocked a shot, he hit the post, and he did that. And I was like, the point I love the most? When you were an awesome teammate, like when you went over to someone who was struggling and you let them know that it's okay and that you supported them and all those kind of things. So I think for me, that's the big thing, like finding the things that he does that maybe, like, my son's favorite thing in the whole world is the sunset and the sunrise. He literally screams every time he sees it. So every time we encourage that instead of being like, what, it's just the sunrise. You're like, my son is, he's probably a little gentler than some kids, and he's into those kind of things of beauty. And so we try and encourage those things when you see it. And
interesting you say gentle. He's gentler. He likes sunsets. Sunsets are seen as gentle and feminine.
I didn't say feminine or masculine. I said gentle. You added your own take on that particular case.
But that's cool, because I feel like that's a thing that we wouldn't tell boys and encourage boys to do.
Yeah, it's kind of the inverse, right? Appreciation for beauty would be seen maybe as more, would even be seen as more of a feminine trait, because a dude
Mother Nature.
A dude who climbs mountains, sure he talks about how beautiful the view is, and that's manly as shit, right?
I just climbed a mountain. It was manly as shit.
Yeah.
I don't know. And it's funny because I almost said, I don't know if I said it entirely, but I said gentler than most boys. Like I find, he can roughhouse a little bit, but I do find he has a tendency to be a little more sensitive. He tends to wear his emotions a little bit more on his sleeve and these kind of things.
Is that because his dad has no problem crying anytime ever?
It might be. Like, I don't know if it's that I've modeled this stuff. Like, I've for sure cried in front of him over pretty simple things. And, I've then gone about my business and handled it. I've let him know, like, hey, if you're, I have regularly told him, if you need to cry, cry.
Because you're the first man I've been around who was like, I might cry. And
I cried in front of you the last time we sat down. You and I sat at the library, and I cried in front of you.
And I was
100%.
Like, there's nothing feminine about it. But it was a thing that we're like, don't man don't cry.
Men cry is, like, when I see it, that's a visceral reaction for me, because at least in most of my experience, you only see it when shit's really bad, right? It's like, if I see a dude crying, it's like,
shit's serious.
Yeah, it's like, I want to go hug the dude, because I'm like, all right, is everyone okay? Is your mom going to be all right? Here are the things I've gotten over, whatever the case may be.
Here are the things I've gotten misty-eyed about this week. I watched Karate Kid 2.
Well, yeah.
And when they did the bone dance thing with the little bell things at the end of it when they fought on the temple, I was like, I can't believe he's doing this. And there's been a couple songs this week that just stuff gets me really emotionally. Yeah. Now, I was raised without a dad, by lesbians. So I don't know if that ties into it, or I was just going to be like this to begin with, or if it was that I didn't have someone who told me, don't cry, or boys don't cry, or all those things. Like, I never had that.
Yeah, I think, I guess contrast that with my experience. My dad is very eminently reasonable. I don't know how many times he's raised his voice to me, but it's part of the reason I would yell when I'm mad. But never seen him cry. Probably the last dude you'd ever see, but that's just kind of his. I don't know how much of that is, just his demeanor. But, I'm kind of more like that too. I'm not as emotionally expressive, Not necessarily a bad thing. That's just kind of not how
you are.
When my system was built and I was watching people, show me what to do, that wasn't something you modeled. Yeah. Now I'm watching. Funny, we were watching Terrence, you and I earlier. My videos of my little nephew.
Baby.
When my sister just had her second child, so now he's a big brother and he's 2, and just the things he's saying in these videos, I'm like, yeah. We said those things to you. Now you're saying that to the baby already. Yeah. Like, so it's just, those are the tools you get in your toolkit for getting through life.
Yeah. So you're of the opinion that it is nurture versus nature. It sounds like to a decent extent.
I think it's both.
I know I was opening up a bit of a look at it.
I think it's absolutely both. Because there's also, I'm made up of my father's genetic material. So, is it the way he was raised or is it his wiring? Because I was raised similar to the way he was raised,
right,
but I also have his wiring. So I think it's a mix of both. And again, I think it's men probably tend to lean one way. Men tend to respond, with violence. Yeah. To what happens when you're really, really mad. Nature versus nurture. But as a man, you're more likely to, project that outward into violence upon another person. Generally, in terms of what you hear about, and a woman, I don't know, maybe more, turn that somewhere else, like not be as direct with it, at least on balance. And
or just violence, violence in general. Like I think of things like, I have broken my son's water bottle when I was really mad. I ended up throwing it across the room, nowhere near him. Mm-hmm. Wasn't throwing it at him. I was so angry. Mm-hmm. I sort of threw it off the side. It hit the fridge, put a huge dent in it. And like my wife would never. You couldn't get her angry enough to outwardly show it. Yeah. And for me in high school, playing football, I had an outlet for anything, any emotion I had. I got to go hit something. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And maybe that's why I didn't cry in high school that much, because I was like, anytime you feel emotions creeping up, I guess I'll just knock someone on the ground.
Yeah. And maybe that's also, in a constructive way, a release for that energy. Yeah. I've found my demeanor changes depending on how much I'm working out. It's a way to burn whatever extra you got off versus having it in there and having it, come out in some other way. I've got to piss.
You got pee?
Yeah, I got pee. All right. Podcast pause.
Sorry, KYLER had to pee. We had to go. We'll be back now, though. So, modeling. What the hell were we just talking about, though?
So we were going to talk about like what KYLER and I have both seen and heard and done from a modeling perspective in the athletics fields, and what we think what impact that could have on the next generation. So I'll just quickly talk. There's a local guy named Chad Lucas. Yes. Chad's a basketball coach in town. Yep. He was a stay-at-home dad who wrote regularly for the Chronicle Herald for quite a while. Yep. That's how kind of I got to know him. And he and I sat down one time after a player of his had committed suicide. And he basically sat down with me and was like, we have to do something. Like we have to change something about the pressures that are on these people and what's expected of them and all these things. Right. And he and I talked at length about this idea of like, how much pressure there is on young male athletes to be a man and what that means. Like the pressure that was on me in high school. I had an interesting situation because I was the captain of my high school football team and the lead of our high school musicals. And instead of being told like, that's a nice balance, basically both of those groups shit on me for being that other thing. According to the football team, I was, we'll say a very negative word that one would use for a homosexual. Okay. And according to the musical people, I was a big dumb jock, and that's what I was. And so it was really hard to like work in that sphere where I was like, well, I'm trying to draw that line of these things, but I didn't hear from the football coaches who certainly heard those things said to me at practices and stuff. Right. Never said, well, that's not okay to say, and we're proud of him doing that. It was more so like, that's neat that you're doing that thing over there. Yeah. But I think like when I think of the people who've been most impactful in my life, it's mostly sports coaches. Like as a young man, those were the people that made a big difference in my life, especially as a young man who didn't have a dad around. Right. So I think there's a responsibility on the people that are doing that, especially like the next generation of people who, have a different viewpoint on the way we should be doing things, to actually make a difference in that field and not do the same, not say the same bullshit. You're playing like a girl, you're yada, 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 but actually, talk about it in a different way.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience with the basketball coach when I first moved here to Canada, and it felt like a dad who understood that you're you're coaching high school boys, so you're going to play that figure. And I had moved here from Vegas, and it was me and mom.
Yeah.
So you see that coaches, the good ones, feel this obligation to be more than your coach, and I think it was cool seeing he had 2 kids, and there'd be times where coach had to leave early because he had to go deal with kids, or no, we can't have practice at this time because coach got to be dad at home. And so there are interesting ways that it was modeled. I guess for me, not having a dad, I was always like, oh, so I know what a man is not.
Right. Yeah.
And so I guess that's why I was hard. And we're asking earlier, like, how do you define masculinity? It's like, I don't really know how I would how I define it. I know the poorest of examples of it to say don't do that. But I think that the challenge or I guess the cool part about having coaches and these type of mentors in your life is that there's lessons that we're realizing, or that we're being taught, that we're not even realizing are happening. And I think that piece is important. And even when I coached, I think I did it without knowing I was doing it, but it's like, we're teaching these kids about life beyond sports, so that it kind of overlapped very unintentionally, but purposefully, right?
Yeah, and I think most people who coach and spend time at it, that winds up being the primary motivator for them, because Lord knows you don't get paid for it.
Right,
it takes a shitload of time.
Yeah,
but I had an experience this past summer. I was coaching with a Peru football team, and we were away at a tournament. And for various reasons, it was kind of it was like 6-a-side football. So rather than full 12-man, half the players, smaller team, which had the effect of being able to get to know the players a little better. Usually haven't been in a football team, 40, 50 odd kids. Your first year guy coach doesn't even know your name.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was 3 coaches and about 20 players, and over the week we really kind of got to know each other. We got to know them, through good times and bad. There's some pretty trying things on that trip, but going over to the last game, we'd been telling them, hey, as you walk from the dorm, just silly stuff, but discipline stuff. Walk straight, 2x2, single file, carry your stuff. Which you're laughing, what that's like. Which is yeah. What do you think of that?
I actually think those are some of the most important parts of it, because I think, like, for me, when I think of, we used to have I played at QEH, so we'd walk across the street to the Wanderers grounds for our games, and we would have to be in a set position and, double file, all these kind of things. And I actually kind of like that idea of, like, unity. Like, we all have to be on the same page doing this together if we're going to move it forward. But I just laugh because I just remember it.
That's like, So we had to walk a 2x2 and, kind of, sit, sing and rap it a little bit, and, just getting excited on the 5-minute walk. And our last game, I grabbed one kid who was kind of like my little captain, and said, okay, man, go get them looking right. You know how this is supposed to be. And looked back over 30 seconds later, everyone was in a single file, all their stuff, even the ones that you couldn't get in a line because they, couldn't pay attention. They had the attention span of a goldfish. Yeah. And that's about as proud as I've been in a while. I'm like, wow, I don't even know. Like you said, without trying, I don't know what we as coaches did this week with these guys, but they're more together, and they're better at a lot of the things that I think are important, being able to, pay attention, understand the situation, do what's appropriate.
Right. I just watched, I've watched it a few times before, but I went on Netflix and I just looked for what movies The Rock has on Netflix. So I just decided I wanted to watch them with The Rock in it.
Interesting urge, but I got you.
And I ended up settling on Gridiron Gang, which is, he works in a youth detention facility. He starts at football. It's a true story. Yeah. And it's funny, like, the things he says in the movie, you think, well, there's no way the real guy probably said that. And then they have clips afterwards of the real guy, and you're like, oh, apparently that's exactly what he said. Yeah. But there's a scene in the movie where one of the kids, they want a water drink. They've been just killing, like, they're dying. He asks for a water break, and the coach says, when you do this right, you can have a water break. And the player just sits down. And you can see the coach is starting to get pissed off, and then he sees another player sit down. And then you see this idea of like, as all the players sit down, one of the other coaches, Exhibit, is like, oh, what's going on? He's like, they're not. And he's like, no, this is perfect. Like, we finally have everyone who don't get along on the same page. It might be that they're against me,
right?
But in fact, I'm wrong,
right?
And so it's totally okay for them to be against me,
right?
And all together,
right?
Like, it's funny when you talked about the idea of not knowing that you've done that thing.
Right.
Grade 12, we had this incredible football season, destroyed everyone, and then lost in the championship game. Like, beat the team we played in the championship game. We beat them 48-3 in the regular season.
Whoa.
We lost by 2 or 3 touchdowns in the championship game.
What?
We went into it way too arrogant, way too cocky. Thought we had it all figured out. Just got stomped. Yeah. And you know what? We're in grade 12. This is our senior year. We've had an undefeated season. There was a lot of guys crying on the sidelines. Yeah. But of course, everyone, like a man, was turned away from everyone with their head down, crying. Yeah. We had a coach named Robbie Thompson. So Robbie has since died. He had cystic fibrosis. He lived well past what he was supposed to. High school, he would go to the hospital for the day and have IVs in, and then come out and go to football practice, and then go back to the hospital afterwards, which is all his homework at school. So he's a really, really incredible guy. Yeah. And so Robbie went down the line with every single player who was crying, turned around the wrong way, turned you around, and said, put your head up. Doesn't matter if anyone sees you cry. You should be crying right now. Put your head up. You have nothing to be upset about. That's what you do. Yeah. We won a provincial championship when I was in grade 10. We've had lots of things. That's actually the moment I remember of a coach. Like, I remember lots of moments of my coach as well, but like, that is for me the defining moment of my football career, was a coach saying, like, you failed. You're allowed to be upset that you failed, but you're not allowed to hide it. And that was actually him saying, like, it's not about burying it down deep and doing this stuff. It's about, you got to move forward. Like, you have to take the next step and go forward. Yeah. And like, that for me was such a fundamental difference in everything that I'd ever sort of seen modeled from a coach. None of the other coaches were telling us to turn around. They were yelling at us and telling everybody to get on the bus. And this was the one guy who was like, you have nothing to be ashamed of for what you've done. You sucked. You blew it. You blew your big chance in grade 12 to win. But such a different thing. I think the fact that the coach didn't necessarily know that he was modeling those things to you, I think is probably better, because when we beat each other over the head with this hammer of these ideas, it just comes off as like a really scripted, really silly thing. But if you just do it, that's Nike's campaign, right? And they did this first with the whole advertising thing. Right.
So, speaking of Nike, we were discussing, Kyle, you mentioned earlier, getting all the way to the end of the end zone, almost to the end zone, and stumble, fall, fumble, and you felt as though that's kind of what Gillette did here with the roughhousing, and in your perspective, you felt like corporation jumped on this movement that they know people will engage with and click. And the feeling of, or how do we feel about corporations using some of these social movements? Because like you said, this is not what Gillette does. Right. But you saw what Nike did with Colin Kaepernick, and then you had black people wearing Nike tracksuits, like it was the new Black Power Fist.
That was the new uniform
of blackness, right? Yeah. So
the revolution's been branded,
right?
Yeah.
You saw what Wakanda and them did. So it was like, okay, maybe we can make some money off of this empowerment of people. But if you fail, then you look like.
Yeah. I mean, I think, to be clear, I think that, the world's now a better place now that ad's out there. We're having this conversation.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like, it's, Mike, or Terrence, you ever the concept called the Overton window?
Never.
I think so.
So anyway, it's something I heard that it comes from like kind of journalism and, I guess, public policy. It's kind of like, what's the range of acceptable opinions? Right. So if you think, say, in terms of what would be considered progressive in terms of all, the idea of all races are equal. a progressive viewpoint in 1900 and a progressive viewpoint in the year 2000 would look quite different.
Right.
In terms of how far off of center are they. And that's kind of like this concept, I guess, Overton came up with it, that you get in public discourse and here's your middle, and then there are ideas that are, a little ways off, and then wilder, and then so crazy. And an idea's chance of catching on has less to do with what it actually is and more to do with how far is it from the middle. Because these crazy ass ideas are never going to catch. Right? So, sometimes it takes something like, that may not, be perfectly executed, or something that might be a little bit wild. Like you'll see a guy take a crazy point of view and write an op-ed. The idea being to, all right, now I'm throwing this idea out here. I'm putting a mark in way out at this end. Now this might become something that we talk about a little more. So you're kind of,
and then it shifts that window over and slides it over a little bit.
Yeah. Nudging the conversation. So, this ad, I mean, it's doing its job, and it's moving us in the direction we got to move. But I also think if I'm splitting hairs, what's happening? What happened at the end with the kids roughhousing? It's just kind of like all right. That takes you from an A to a B plus,
right?
But maybe is that something that you take on? Like, is it okay to even take a social issue and use it in your marketing, or if you accept that? Marketing is a big part of our society and, our culture. So it exists. It has an effect. Why not try to make it have a positive one? Right?
Yeah. I mean, my thing is like, I'm not necessarily going to shift and start, buying Gillette products because they did this, and but I don't have a problem with a company.
Why not?
Well, I don't have a problem with it. Why am I not going to buy Gillette?
Right.
Oh, I'll still probably buy. Honestly, I have a safety razor with blades, so I don't buy, Mach 3s or Mach 12s or whatever is out there now. I buy Gillette shaving cream.
Okay.
I'll still buy Gillette shaving cream. I'm not going to buy more Gillette shaving cream because I don't need more shaving cream. But like, I would probably at this point, I would say at this point, if I was in a store, I would probably look for Gillette when I was going for a shaving cream now, more than I would for Barbasol or whatever other brand there is.
That's interesting because, I mean, the idea of advertising, I feel like, it's something maybe not everybody thinks of right away. Like, advertising isn't, you're not supposed to watch a commercial or see an ad and then
go buy something.
And then want that thing.
Right, yeah.
They're putting that in your head. They're putting that in your head so that, the next time I'm looking for pop, I remember all of those cute ads with the Coca-Cola polar bears and
That's
whatnot.
The first thing that came to mind when you said that.
Yeah. Like, polar bears got fuck all to do with cola, but they make you think of the brand.
Right.
And then when you're looking at all these brands, oh yeah, that one.
Yeah.
And then there you go. So, it's interesting to think, before it was just put it out there, fun jingle, make you think of it. Now it's attach it to an idea. So, not just putting it there, but if someone thinks this, they're going to have a positive association. Yeah, you're not about to drop your current razor and go get Gillette, but on balance, if you ever had to buy some, aftershave for that shiny head, new brand, why not go Gillette?
Get you some Gillette.
I think like my big thing too is like they've done something that's better than what we had before.
Right. Yeah.
And so for me, I'm like, look, if they end up making some money off that, they've done something that we didn't have in the world before. Right. Well, why is it bad to make money?
Right. If we're putting stuff out there, everybody's in the conversation. Everyone's contributing to the overall mosaic of what's going on out in the world. Whether you like it or not, there's no neutral actors. You're either you're perpetuating something, and it could be good, could be bad, could be neutral, but you are still having an effect.
So what about the people who feel like it's unfair or inappropriate for Gillette to use the Me Too movement to increase sales?
I wonder what their argument would be.
My thing is, I don't see it really associating that closely with the Me Too movement.
No,
I don't. Okay. I get that. I get that that's where part of that conversation is, but like the Me Too movement is about women being able to share their story of what has happened to them and to really get people to understand how common that thing is.
Okay.
And I think I think that really speaks to, I think just letting people know how prevalent that problem is.
Right.
When I look at this ad, I see it much more directed at the people who are on that. We talked about this a little bit before, who are on that bubble, who don't 100% know what's right or wrong in sort of really small snippets of space.
Okay.
And I think those are the people that this ad is really directed to, are the people who don't think about it when they say, be a man, or you're being a girl, or don't cry like a girl. I think it's the people that they're not thinking that. I don't see them as actually that closely connected.
I would argue that I think calling out the behavior of men and the negative, toxic behaviors of men, I think directly correlates with the abuse of these toxic men's power that has affected women. And
so that parallel campaign.
Okay, fair.
I think they're running on the same path.
Yeah. Maybe,
beside each other.
Me Too's kind of like, that's one aspect of kind of men. We can be dicks sometimes. We can be.
Right.
So Me Too movement's one aspect of that, but there are many others.
Yeah.
Right. Because I also think it's really important that men are having this conversation with other men. I watched a YouTube series, The Grapevine, and I thought it was a great conversation. It was diverse. There's like 10, 15 black folk in a room having discussions about whatever. Part of me was like, this is cool. And I'm sure maybe this has happened, but there needs to be also a space where, like we did with the episode 49 with the N-word, you have to be able to have these unsafe conversations with people who aren't just going to agree with your perspective. And so there has to be this sort of allowing the other, quote unquote, other into a space to be educated. But there also has to be, I think, before we can have that conversation, and this even would tie back to Me Too, and I've heard this argument as well, is women need to figure out what it is that women want and all agree on before coming to men and saying, here's what we want. Because if you got women saying 10 different things and then inviting men in on a conversation and they have... Do you see what I'm saying?
There's a documentary that Vice put out. I think you can watch on YouTube, and it's called Raised Without Gender.
Okay.
It takes place mostly in Sweden, where they're much more progressive with how they view gender than we are. And it follows a bunch of different stories, including an individual who prefers the pronoun they over he or she, right. and they're raising their children without gender.
Right.
And they, in one case, the kid seems pretty sure of what gender they are, and it actually seems a little ridiculous because they do really actually seem like they're pushing on this kid that they don't need to be one of these genders. And the kid's like, I'm gonna just get this dress because I'm a girl and I like it. Yeah. But the real kicker was, at one point, the individual wanted to write a letter to the school that their daughter says daughter was going to be going to sort of explain their situation. And they started writing it, and every word that they used, they were like, well, that's not right. It's not the right, technically. And you got to the point where you're like, if you don't know what we should be saying, right, then how are we supposed to know? I had a conversation one day at the library. I was there with my kids, and there was a trans woman who was sitting at the same table I was, and we're having a conversation. And we actually got into a conversation about all this stuff. And they said, she said, one of my big challenges is I don't know how to have these conversations with people all the time. Right. And so how can I expect you to know how to have these conversations when you're, another degree separated from that? So I do think that there's an extent where the argument and conversation does have to be framed enough that we can have a reasonable conversation about it. Right. But maybe that comes out from a conversation like this, where we're like we're trying to answer questions. We couldn't come up with the questions. Like, we struggled with what questions we were even trying to answer. We knew the conversation, but
I think talking about what is a man, what is a woman, that's one step removed from why are we here, right? It's like we're people, and then all right, there's generally two sort of sets of equipment you can come with, and then beyond that, those are pretty fundamental. And I think that's maybe why the conversation is hard for people. Is that's a pretty that's like kind of like telling you, all right, there's boys and there's girls. If you're raised that way and you've never ever heard anything that there might be something outside of that, now all of a sudden we're talking about, gender being a spectrum rather than the binary. That's like someone telling you the sky's green.
Right.
And you see the visceral reaction that people have to discussions of gender. And it sounds to me like a lot of that, there's just not even fear of that, but fear of the unknown. You're like, well, if boys aren't boys and girls aren't girls, then what's real?
What's what?
Yeah. And not it. Some people are really uncool with things changing, period, I think we can say.
Oh yeah.
So.
I mean, I've said this before. I might have even said this on episode 49 that my family was comfortable with using the term colored fella when I was like 16, and that's when they changed to that term. They're like, I guess we can't say the last thing before, and I was like, you couldn't say this thing now, like and so for them this change of like, well, what are we supposed to even say, for me was like, I don't know, just decent things, like just why does it have to be some sort of like a a negative connotation associated with stuff. But I think these conversations, like I do think that more men have to have conversations with more men. There is a really good scene, probably my favorite scene in that. Yes. And it's not done with beating over the head, but the woman walks by the bar that the guy's coming out of. Yeah. And he goes to say something, and his friend just steps in his way and is like, dude, no,
not cool. Yeah.
And it's not done over the top. There's no preachiness to it. He just goes, no, man, you can't do that. Come on. Yeah. Like,
and I think that's the sort of thing that, hopefully that resonates with people. Because I think, most of us have been that guy. I definitely identified strongly with that one. Probably spent too much time working at bars when I was younger. But, I think most of my friends, because I try to hang out with decent people, have been kind of the brakes on the dumbass, shaved ape behavior. Yeah. But, if people could get past the noise and look at like, okay, so are you going to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the actions in that commercial? Then, I think it'd be a lot easier to get consensus on it.
Yeah.
It's, I was thinking, we're talking about, Alexis Jones, I believe her name is, showed her out. She's got a great video on YouTube. I can't think of the name, but we'll post the link. But she's a speaker, and she works with college sports teams, pro sports teams. Giving talks on essentially gender relations, we'll say. And this was a talk that I had when I played university football. I don't know what your experience were, but the beginning of the year, we basically just get a talk around how to comport yourself with women. And in the sense, positive, very positive stuff, no means no back when that was maybe a question, which sounds weird to say now, but, just how to be what I consider, a responsible man when it comes to your relations. Right. And so she'll deliver that sort of thing. And she has a great talk on, like what we talked about, humanizing, sort of humanizing the other side. Because you hear a lot of, men and then women, like we sort of talked about, like sort of othering that group and men controlling the discussion. That's what gets out there. Right. She, I won't give her stuff away, but does a great job, in how she approaches it, humanizing it and turning it into a discussion about behavior with the folks she's speaking to. So it's not about ideas of what's a man and what's acceptable. It's these are the specific kinds of behavior. Ask yourself, do you support this? Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, it turns it away from being a question of ideologies and identity to action, which is really what actually matters.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, does it matter if if you might have racist or sexist or whatever-ist ideas in your head, if when you go out in the world, you make the conscious decision to do a good thing? I mean, I grew up in what I would consider a very backwards, I'm the black sheep of the family because I went to university and I can't fix a carburetor, and I stayed at home with my kids. Mm-hmm. But so there are things for sure that I have had in my head from growing up in a white, town and moving to the city and suddenly living around people of other colors.
Yeah.
That I've thought for sure 100%. I've thought like, oh, this is what those people are like, or this is what I know of that group from my experience that's been told from my family. But for me, it matters how you act on those things and whether or not you're open to the idea of, we talked earlier about, can you let your mind change? You know, can the experiences you have actually impact and form the person you are? Or are we just done growing and we just wait till we're dead? Yeah. And then the next generation is hopefully better or worse, depending on it.
Progress happens one funeral at a time.
That's heartbreaking.
But that's the thing is like, I think we are all... Did you ever see the movie Crash?
Yep.
Not the one where they have sex in cars, but the other one with Sandra Bullock, Ryan Felipe, Ludacris, all these guys. So I'm pretty sure it won the Oscar the year that it came out. Yeah. But it's all these intersecting stories happening in LA. There's police officers, there's immigrants, there's all this different stuff. And the movie opens. I'm going to get spoiler alert, but it's like 15 years old.
Yeah, you should have seen it by now.
Yeah, you should have seen it. But the movie opens, and Sandra Bullock and Brendan Fraser are walking in the street, and Ludacris and someone else are walking up behind them. And she takes his arm and comes a little closer to Brendan Fraser, and you can see that she's like a little bit nervous because there's these two black guys there, and they mug her.
Yeah.
And they are talking about how they can't believe that she would have this feeling about them. Yeah. And then they say, why do you think she feels that way? Well, probably because we're about to mug her.
Yeah. And she gets robbed.
Yeah. And I remember walking out of that movie, because there's all these moments like that throughout the course of the movie where you're challenged on what you think and is it right or is it wrong. And I remember walking out of that, and my first thing I said was like, yeah, I'm a racist. Like in my head, I was like, I have for sure had that visceral reaction to situations in my life and just had that instantaneous thought. But it's what you do. Like it matters what you actually do. And that, that's the thing I really like, I think, about the Gillette ad, if we bring it back to it, is it's
wrap it up, Mikey.
It's what you're doing. It's whether or not you're doing the right thing. Like the Nike ad with Kaepernick. Like people go on and on about Kaepernick's being selfish, Kaepernick's being that, all this stuff. Have you seen the shit he's been doing since he did this? He's given millions and millions of dollars to young people in areas that they don't have anything. He's traveled the world trying to do right by people. And he's forgone a huge contract to do that. And so for me, it's what you do. It's the actions. It's do you be a man or are you a man? Am I a man because I'm a man, or am I a man because I went out and did the human things I should do as a man because they're the right things to do?
Facts.
I was true to my word. I was honorable. I stood by my convictions. All those kind of things. I think that it comes down to it comes down to what you do. Like when I look at my son tapping that player on the back, his goalie on the back, and saying good game, he's the only one doing that on his team. He's not the best hockey player on that team, but if I'm coaching a team and it comes time to pick C's and A's for captains and assistant captains, he makes that list. Because that's the kind of man that I want. That's the kind of man that I want leading a team.
And if you think about it, I think going back as far as you can, that's even back when the ideas of what a man is were very set, that is still the trait you want. I think I was watching football last weekend when the Eagles lost to the Saints. Did you watch that game?
I did not.
No, you didn't. In any case, long story short, right at the end, Eagles quarterback Nick Foles throws a nice ball to his receiver, who's had a great game, great year. Right there, would have extended the drive, put them in a position to win. Right through his hands to the other team, game over. And, obviously that guy was just, distraught on the sidelines. And you could see in all the chaos, their season has fallen apart. Quarterback went over, found him, and hugged him for probably about 2 minutes. And if you just look at if you look at it purely just from execution perspective, that you did your job, that guy screwed his job up, that's why you guys aren't moving on. But I was talking to the father of the quarterback on the team I coach, and just mentioned, hey man, make sure you show him that, because if he wants to, the quarterback who's a leader on the football team, that's more important than how hard he throws.
So Chad Lucas one time sent me this video.
This is the last thing you're about to say, Mike, because I got to get you home.
This is it?
Yeah, this is it.
I got to go be a man and take care of my kids. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, baby.
Handle that business.
So I have to carry the two of them to the back counter so they can have their medicine, because they will only go to bed if I carry the two of them to the back counter.
Gotcha.
So Chad Lucas sent me this video one time, and it's a state semifinal baseball game going on in like some. You probably know where I'm going with this, but
I think I've seen this one. Yeah,
it's in the States. These two teams are playing in the state semifinals, high school semifinals, and pitcher strikes out this batter to win the game. Team comes rushing the field, rushes him, and he breaks away from all those guys and goes to home plate and starts hugging the kid that he just struck out. And the backstory is they've been best friends since they were kids. They went to different high schools, and he knew like that's what is needed right now. Like, yeah, I won and I can deal with that later, but like this guy needs me right now. And it's funny because I posted this as like, this is sportsmanship. Like, you know, it's like when you see both teams kneel down and pray together, or at least sit together when someone's hurt, and like they've been trying to kill each other all game. Right. But they come together when those things happen. Yeah. That same kind of concept. But you read through the comment thread of that post, and it's full of people saying, I'd cut that pitcher tomorrow if he did that. Like, he's letting down his team by this and that. And I'm like, please don't coach sports. Please don't be the role model for these kids, because they need people. You know, the hockey coach, this is the last thing I'll say, I know I'm talking a lot. The hockey coach of my son's team, he said, today there's 3 things. Third most important, I want, 2 guys in on the puck and 2 guys out, so that we're always sort of backing each other up. Second thing is I want sticks on the ice. And what's the most important thing? And he asks that question, and all the kids yell, have fun. Yeah. And I've seen some of the other coaches in the league already, and this is a very young age group of like yelling at their kids for different stuff. And I'm just like, look, my kid's probably not going to be in the NHL, but neither are most of these kids. Right. And the kids who get the right leadership are going to be better kids. Yeah.
Big facts. Big facts. So that's a little bit about masculinity from some men who consider ourselves men, good men.
You sort of said that like a question from some men. Men?
Well,
you don't want to assume. We haven't had the conversation.
Hey, listen, you're not allowed to make assumptions nowadays back to the things you got to worry about saying and defending people, but not having enough conversations. Moral of the story, we need more men talking to more men about man things, feminine things. We need women having conversations with other women, and then we need to come together, and we had to create open and safe spaces to be able to share our likes, our dislikes, and our differences. So if people are doing that and they're changing their own narratives, then hey, whatever the fuck we doing is working. Did you like that?
I did like that.
Did you like that one? That was just like on a whim, but it felt good. It felt good coming out.
Spitting.
That was good. That's it. This is Mike Tanner. It's KYLER Crawford. It's Terrence Taylor. This is Changing Narrative Podcast. Thank you for listening.